Hey, I recently learned Redis, and I thought it was uh really cool, really easy to learn. So I wanted to try to make a video on how to get started with Redis and Python, just because when I was learning it, I had a hard time finding quick videos on how to get set up. So I thought I'd make one, and hopefully, this video will help you. So first things first, what is Redis? Redis is a database similar to MongoDB. Um, that's pretty much all you need to know for this tutorial. It has really specialized uses as far as caching. One of the major draws of Redis is I believe it's like a sub millisecond time to retrieve data from a Redis store because it stores data in memory. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not too sure about that. But for this tutorial, I'm just gonna show you how to get set up with Redis as if it were a document database. Similar to MongoDB, if you know what that is. If not, don't worry about it. This tutorial is beginner level. So first things first, let's set up our Redis database. So we want to go to Redis Cloud. So let me just do it in a different tab just to show you exactly what's happening. If you Google Redis Cloud and follow this link, it'll take you to this page where you can get started and set up a cloud database so you can access it anytime, anywhere, so you don't have to do it locally. So if you just follow these steps, it's pretty straightforward. Eventually, once you follow all these steps and get set up, you'll land on this. Sorry, not this page. I believe this page where you'll be able to see your DB. So once you've followed that and have gotten to this page, we can move on to the next thing that I wanted to mention, which is Redis Insight. So again, um, if you just Google Redis Insight and go to this page, you can download it. So what is Redis Insight? It's a GUI, a graphical user interface, that lets you interact with the data in your DB and visualize it in real time. For me personally, I found that it's really helpful in learning commands and just experimenting and playing around in real time with different functionality. So for me, it was really helpful learning and starting out with Redis. So once you download it, I'm not going to download it because I already have it. But again, I'm sure it's straightforward. You can just press this and follow whatever prompts it gives you. I personally followed Fireship's Redis video where he builds a quick project with Redis and TypeScript. Um, we're not using TypeScript, but he shows how to install Redis Insight, and the process is identical for this video. So I'm going to link that video in the description. Just watch it, and hopefully, if you do all the steps right, you'll end up on a page like this where you'll be able to see your database that you showed up. And from here, you can just click into it, and you'll see something like this. It might prompt you to do a tutorial if it's your first time, but you'll see something like this. So, assuming you've done both steps of setting up Redis Cloud and Redis Insight correctly, then we can actually go ahead and step into VS Code, which is where I'm going to be doing the coding. Um, and we're going to get started. So first step is we want to keep our project organized and contained using a virtual environment. And the reason for this is if we are using Redis here and we install a certain version, but then we go into another project and install a different version of Redis. When we come back into this project, there's going to be all sorts of conflicts because this was written originally with a different version than what you may have installed later. So using a virtual environment just helps you get around that. I'll explain virtual environments a little more in another video. But for now, you can read up on them, or I'm just going to assume you get the gist. So to quickly show you how to set it up, you just want to pip install virtual env. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do that. And from there, you want to make your virtual environment by doing the following command. You just do python -n then venv, virtual environment, and then the name of the folder that you want to create for your environment. So you can name this anything. A lot of just people do my env or env. For this, I'm going to call it Redis tut env Redis tutorial environment, and then just hit enter. And this will load for a second, and you'll see on the left side here of VS Code, folder will show up. Um, and okay, there you go. So it's done loading. From here, just activate your virtual environment. So the way that you can do that is just doing the name of your folder that you just created, /scripts /activate. And what that is doing is it's literally just going into this folder, into the script folder, and running this activate script. So if you run that, you'll know that it worked if on the left side you see a green folder name in parentheses. So if you don't see this, just make sure you wrote the command correctly, capitalized S, and once you run it, you should be able to see this. So if this green name shows up on the left, you'll know that you're working in your virtual environment. So just to show you what I mean as far as like keeping things contained, this is pretty much a blank slate. It's like a local machine, a virtual machine pretty much, where you're just working from a blank slate. So if you do pip list, a pip list is a command that just shows you all the packages that you've installed. You see all we have is pip. There's nothing else there. So if I were to deactivate my virtual environment, in other words, step out of it back into my main environment, I do deactivate. And you can see the green parentheses disappear. If I do pip list now, you'll just see all the global packages I have installed, which is a good amount. So again, I'm just going to step back into the virtual environment by running the name of the folder, /scripts, /activate. And again, green parentheses with the name of the folder, so we know we're good to go. And we can just confirm by doing pip list, and we'll see that this is empty. So now we're good to get started. I'm going to clear the terminal just to keep it looking a little nicer. So now we can actually get started in the code. Well, before we get started in the code, by the end of the tutorial, you'll know how to do this. So before we actually get started with the code, I want to go talk about Redis Insight to demonstrate what I mean when I say that it's really good for learning commands and just experimenting and visualizing your data. So let's say we're in Redis Insight and I want to practice, I want to experiment with how to set a new element, how to create a new element in the database. So in this bottom left area, you can see these tabs, let's say CLI, Command Helper, and Profiler. If you press CLI and Command Helper, that's the ones that I'm going to be using in this tutorial. You can also use Profiler and just experiment on your own, see what it does. But for now, I'm just going to focus on these two. So CLI lets you just use the command line interface. In other words, just run Redis commands right here in Redis Insight and see what happens. And the Command Helper, I guess I'll show you what that does in a minute. So let's say we want to create a new element. In Redis, the way to create a new element is to do set. And then as you can see here, it just gives you kind of an autocomplete feature or like a hint feature on like how to write it. And then the command helper, it'll just show you more information about that specific command. So what we need to worry about is just the very basic stuff, the required stuff, the key and the value. So let's say we want to create a new key value pair where the key is Batman and the value is awesome, or the value is awesome. So if we just type that and press enter, we can see it says okay. indicating that it worked. And you might be wondering, like, okay, you said it was real time, but it's not showing up here. Um, don't worry, just press this refresh arrow in the top right area, and you can see Batman shows up. This stuff is something related to a personal project, so this isn't supposed to, if you're doing this for the first time, you should only be seeing Batman. And from here, when I say that Redis Insight lets you visualize your data, if you click into Batman, you can see the string value the of the value. And you can change it in here, but don't worry about. I'm not gonna worry about that right now, just because it's out of scope for this tutorial. So we've set Batman. Okay, so now another basic command is if we want to retrieve some information from our database. So if we wanted to retrieve the Batman, the value at the Batman key, we can do the get command where we do get. And as you can see, the autocomplete feature tells us that the argument required is a key. So we're going to get Batman. And you can see now that it returns is awesome, and that matches with what the value is. So that's good to go. So the third core function of core basic function of any database really is deleting elements from your database or dropping elements. So to do that in Redis, let's pretend I didn't know how to do it, just so I can demonstrate the command helper area. Um, so I know I want to delete something, so I can just search the word delete. And as you can see, if I click into these, this seems a little overcomplicated. That's because this is not what we're trying to do. Same here. This is not what we're trying to do. All we want to do is just delete this key from the database. So you can just like just mess around with different words. So maybe drop is not there. And you'll find eventually if you experiment enough, if you do del and scroll down a little bit, you can see down here in the bottom right, the del command. And if you click into here, we can confirm that del deletes one or more keys, and it shows us how to do it in the command line. So it says del key and then an optional however many keys you want to delete. So we just want to delete Batman. So we're going to do del Batman. And here you can see it returns integer one. So what does that mean? All that means is that this function, the del function, was successfully executed on one element inside the database. So there's only one key that matches Batman. So this makes sense. We deleted the one key that is Batman. So again, it doesn't show up immediately, but if you press refresh in this top right corner, you can see Batman disappeared. Okay. So what if we delete something that's not there? Is it gonna break Redis? The answer is no, and you can just prove that by doing del Batman. You'll see it'll return zero because it acted on zero elements inside the database. Since there's no Batman key, it acted on no elements because this didn't match anything inside the database. And if you refresh, everything stays the same. Everything's fine. And one more thing that I want to just show in Redis Insight is that these CLI commands are case insensitive. So we could do set, but it would be the same thing if you did it in lowercase. So if we did lowercase set, the same thing, Batman is awesome. We did that, it returns okay, indicating success. We can refresh and we can see it's exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete Batman. And now we're going to do the same exact thing in Python. So to get started, I'm going to go to my VS Code. I'm going to delete this just so it doesn't look so scary. I'm going to show you that it's really easy to do, and we're going to do it together. So the first step is to import our Redis package with an import statement. From here, if you're confused on how to get started, the way that I learned is just by following the documentation. Redis is one of the best documented databases most developer friendly on like ever, from what I've heard, at least. And I can vouch for it. The documentation is really helpful. So let's say we're following the Redis Py guide on Python. So we already did pip install Redis, and we want to connect to our database. So let's just go ahead and copy exactly what it says in the documentation. So we're going to do R is equal to Redis. So we're initializing our Redis client. And I'm just going to do some minor changes just to make it a little easier to read. This is a personal choice. This doesn't affect anything in the actual functionality, obviously. So if we save this and try to run this file, I'm going to do Python redis-simple.py because for some reason doing the play button doesn't really do anything. I think it has something to do with being in a virtual environment. So if I just run this file, we have a module error that says no module named Redis. So why is that? Okay, so actually I forgot to install Redis. So the first step is to pip install Redis, and you can do pip list to double check it. So it says successfully installed Redis 5.2.0. And if you do pip list, you can just go ahead and double check. And we can see that Redis is there. So we're good to go. I'm going to clear this terminal. And again, I'm going to do Python redis-simple.py. And nothing happens. So we can't tell if this is working or not. So let's say we wanted to set our Batman variable. We would just do r.set Batman is awesome. Okay, so you're saying, what if I didn't know how to do this? The whole point of the tutorial is to teach you how to do this, and I just kind of skip through it. Well, this is why I say Redis Insight is so helpful, because if I go back to it and I want to figure out how to do the set command, I just look up set, I scroll until I find it, right here, set, and you can press read more, and it'll open up a new tab with a link to the documentation. And from here, you can scroll down and you can see examples of how to actually do this in code. So you can see here's an example of how to do it in the Redis CLI, but below that is an example of how to do it in code. So all I did was just this part where I set the key. First argument is the key, and the second argument is the value. So if we press save and run Python Redis simple py, you'll see that we actually get an error. So why are we getting an error? Well, if you read the message, Redis.connection exceptions.connection error, error 10061 connecting to localhost 6379. No connection could be made because the target machine has actively refused it. That's because I'm not actually running a Redis server on localhost at this port. This is connecting to nothing because I never initialized a server there. So that's why we set up our Redis cloud. Of course, if you wanted to do it locally, you could probably Google and follow documentation to figure out how to do that. But the way I'm going to do it here is through Redis cloud. So we're going to have to change some of these parameters. So if you go back to the Redis Cloud portal, or whatever you want to call it, the Redis Cloud console, this page when you set up your Redis Cloud online, and click into your database, you're going to see your public endpoint very close to the top of general under configuration. So this public endpoint is what we want to paste to our host and our port. So I'll explain that. So we want this URL to be our host. This is where our Redis server is being hosted. It's being hosted in the US and the East. So we're going to copy this link. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it as a string where localhost is. And then this port number corresponds to this number at the end of your public endpoint. So again, you're going to copy just the number and paste it into the port value. Okay, so from here, if we try to run it again, we're going to see another error. So this time it's saying redis.exceptions.authentication error, authentication required. So by default, your Redis cloud database is password protected because for security reasons. Because if you think about it, if this endpoint is public, so if anybody were able to connect to your database, they could potentially delete values, add fake information, or just mess with it with bad intentions. So you want to have measures to make sure that you're protected, which is why there's a password. So if you scroll towards the bottom of the configuration tab, just a little bit before you reach the danger zone, there is a security tab where you can see default user and default user password. So this is the important part. So we want to pass our password as an argument to our client where we're initializing our client. So we're going to add another parameter called password equals, and we're going to make it a string. And if you're doing this on your own, you would just copy the password and paste it into VS Code. Since I'm publishing this on YouTube, I don't want to show my code. So I set up a .env file. Um, so if you don't know what a .env file is, it's just a file that lets you keep secret information secret. So what it looks like on the inside is there's just a single variable that I chose to name Redis password. And it's just a string of like what my password actually is. So this is all that is inside this .env file. And to access it, I'm not going to go into detail because it's not in the scope of this specific tutorial. But I'm just going to copy and paste some code. So I'm just going to import OS and .env. And I'm going to load the information from the .env file into this Python file. And then the password will be set to os.getEnv Redis password. So it's just getting whatever information corresponds to Redis password from this file and replacing this with that information. So if I press save, running this is going to give me an error just because this is also a module that you have to install. So I'm going to go ahead and just do pip install python-env. And it is successfully installed. I'm going to clear the terminal just to keep it looking nice and then run the file again. So before I run the file, I just want to show you on Redis Insight, this is what it looks like. So if I run the file, okay, I can go into Redis Insight, refresh, and you'll see that the Batman key along with the is awesome value is there now. So that's how you do it in Python. And then the same thing, if we wanted to get our value now, we would just replace this in the code. And we would get the Batman key. So this is exactly what we did in Redis Insight, just Pythonified pretty much. And again, if you're ever unsure on how to do something in Python, you can just use the command helper in Redis Insight, press read more on the specific command, and it'll open the tab. And from here, you can read code examples on how to do it. So I'm just doing r.get with the key. So I'm doing r.get Batman. And I'm going to set this equal to a temp variable just so I can print it out, so I can show you that it's actually working, doing what it's supposed to do. So if I save this, do Python redis simple.py, it'll print out is awesome, and we can double check that matches the value at our Batman key. And then the last thing we want to do is delete it. So again, the specific command is not actually del. I think that's a reserved keyword in Python. So it, to delete something, you have to do delete. And I believe the argument is just the key. And I'm going to actually double check that using the command helper. So yeah, it's just r.delete with the key being passed as an argument. So I'm going to save and I'm going to run this file. And as you can see, if we go into Redis Insight and refresh, there's nothing there anymore. We successfully deleted the file. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. It's a very quick introduction, so I didn't really get into like the best use cases of Redis or how to make the most out of um, any of the commands. But if you're interested or curious and want to learn more on your own, I'm going to link the resources that helped me learn Redis when I was learning it in the description. And I really strongly recommend just reading the documentation because it really is just such a well-documented database. It's really helpful. Um, and hopefully, yeah, so hopefully now you know how to get started and you can start incorporating Redis into your personal projects.